The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the sprawling conference center as Marcus Chen adjusted his security badge and checked his radio one final time. At 34, he moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to blend into backgrounds, to become invisible when necessary. His black uniform was pressed, his posture straight but not rigid, and his dark eyes swept the lobby with a practiced awareness that most people mistook for simple attention to duty. The morning rush was beginning as tech industry professionals streamed through the glass doors, their conversations buzzing with excitement about the 3-day summit that would bring together some of the biggest names in technology. Marcus nodded politely to each group that passed, his presence acknowledged with the brief, dismissive glances typically reserved for service workers. His supervisor Derek Martinez appeared from behind the reception desk, clipboard in hand and irritation already etched across his weathered face. Derek had been running security at the center for 15 years and treated newer guards like Marcus with barely concealed disdain. "Security is all about hierarchy," Derek announced loudly enough for the other guards to hear. "Some people understand that, and others think showing up and looking professional is enough." Marcus said nothing, simply waited for his assignment while Derek made a show of consulting his paperwork. The other guards, Mike and James, exchanged knowing looks. They had witnessed these morning displays before. "Today's the big day, Chen," Derek continued. "Thousands of people, millions of dollars in deals, and we need our best people in the right positions. Which is why you'll be handling parking garage duty." The assignment was clearly meant as a slight. While the other guards would be stationed in the main halls near the VIP areas, Marcus would be relegated to the underground garage, watching cars and dealing with minor disputes over parking spaces. "Copy that," Marcus replied simply, his voice steady and professional. "Any specific protocols for the garage level?" Derek seemed disappointed by the lack of reaction. "Just keep people from stealing each other's spots and make sure nobody who doesn't belong gets past the barriers. Think you can handle that?" "Understood," Marcus said, clipping the garage-level keys to his belt. As the morning briefing concluded and the guards dispersed to their positions, Marcus made his way toward the stairwell that led to the parking levels. Behind him, he could hear Derek telling Mike and James about the importance of their VIP protection duties, how real security work required experience and instincts that couldn't be taught. The parking garage was quiet, filled with the expensive cars of early arrivals. Marcus walked the perimeter slowly, his trained eyes noting exit points, camera positions, and potential security concerns. Despite Derek's dismissive attitude, he approached every assignment with the same methodical thoroughness that had once kept soldiers alive in far more dangerous places. His radio crackled with updates from the upper levels as the conference center filled with attendees. By mid-morning, the garage was nearly full, and Marcus had helped direct several confused visitors to available spaces. Each interaction was brief and polite, his presence barely registering in their minds as they hurried toward elevators that would take them to the real excitement upstairs. The conference center transformed overnight into a bustling hub of technological innovation. By 7 in the morning, luxury vehicles filled every available space in the parking garage as industry titans, startup founders, and venture capitalists arrived for what many considered the most important tech summit of the year. Marcus watched from his post as Teslas, BMWs, and the occasional Lamborghini found their designated spots. Upstairs, the energy was electric. The main auditorium could seat 3,000 people, and every ticket had sold out months in advance. Keynote speakers included the CEOs of major social media platforms, artificial intelligence pioneers, and entrepreneurs whose companies had revolutionized everything from transportation to healthcare. Derek's voice crackled through the radio every few minutes, his tone increasingly self-important as he coordinated security for the VIP areas. He had positioned himself near the main stage where the biggest names would be speaking, clearly enjoying his proximity to power and wealth. "All units, this is command," Derek announced over the radio. "I want everyone to remember that we have some of the most influential people in the world here today. Eyes sharp, protocols tight. This is what real security looks like." Marcus continued his methodical patrol of the garage levels, noting the arrival patterns and keeping mental track of unusual activity. During a brief lull, his radio crackled with Derek's voice specifically addressing him. "Chen, you still down there watching the cars?" Derek's tone carried barely concealed amusement. "Hope you're not getting too bored with the simple stuff." "All clear on parking levels," Marcus responded professionally. Good, Derek replied. "Leave the complicated security work to those of us who know what we're doing. Just keep those luxury cars safe, will you?" Mike's voice joined the conversation. "Hey Derek, should we be worried about Chen getting overwhelmed if someone asks him for directions?" The radio filled with laughter from the other guards. James chimed in, asking if Marcus needed backup in case he encountered any particularly aggressive parking meters. Marcus remained silent, continuing his patrol. He had learned long ago that some battles were not worth fighting, especially when they distracted from the real mission. And despite Derek's dismissive attitude, Marcus took his responsibilities seriously. Every person in this building deserved protection, whether they were tech billionaires or parking attendants. As the morning progressed, the underground garage became a forgotten zone while all attention focused on the glamorous events happening above. The main auditorium was packed, smaller conference rooms hosted intimate discussions about venture capital and emerging technologies, and networking areas buzzed with conversations that could reshape entire industries. Derek's radio updates grew more frequent and self-congratulatory. He described his interactions with famous entrepreneurs, his coordination with VIP security details, and his oversight of what he called the real security operations. Meanwhile, Marcus noticed things others missed. A service entrance that had been propped open longer than necessary. A delivery truck that had made 2 trips when the manifest showed only 1 scheduled. Small details that probably meant nothing, but in his experience, small details sometimes meant everything. The main conference hall pulsed with energy as the afternoon keynote session began. 3,000 attendees filled every seat, their attention focused on a presentation about artificial intelligence that could revolutionize healthcare. The speaker, a renowned researcher from Stanford, gestured enthusiastically at slides showing breakthrough algorithms that could diagnose diseases faster than human doctors. Marcus remained in the parking garage, but his trained awareness extended far beyond the concrete walls around him. Through security cameras and radio chatter, he maintained a mental map of the entire facility. That was when he noticed the individual who had caught his attention earlier making a third appearance near the service elevators. The man wore standard conference credentials and carried a laptop bag like hundreds of others, but something felt wrong. His movement patterns were too deliberate, too focused on areas where civilians typically had no business. Marcus had seen similar behavior in places where such patterns usually preceded violence. He keyed his radio to report the observation. "Command, this is Chen. I have a potential concern regarding an individual near service elevator bank 3. Derek's response came immediately, tinged with familiar irritation. "Chen, unless someone is actively stealing a car down there, I need you to stay focused on your assignment. We have real security matters to handle up here." "Copy," Marcus replied, but continued monitoring the cameras when possible. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from his daughter's school. The caller ID showed Lily's name, and Marcus immediately answered despite being on duty. "Hi Daddy," Lily's 80-year-old voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I know you're working, but I wanted to tell you about my presentation tomorrow." Marcus smiled, his entire demeanor softening. "Tell me about it, sweetheart." "It's about heroes," she explained. "Mrs. Peterson said we should talk about someone who makes a difference. I picked you because you keep people safe every day." The simple honesty in her voice touched something deep in Marcus's chest. "You know you're my hero too, right? You're brave and smart and kind. Will you be able to come watch?" she asked hopefully. "I'll do everything I can to be there," Marcus promised. "What time does it start?" 9 in the morning in our classroom. I made a poster with your picture in your uniform." "That sounds amazing, Lily. I'm proud of you for working so hard on it." After ending the call, Marcus felt the familiar weight of balancing his responsibilities as a father with the demands of work. Lily was everything to him, the reason he had chosen quiet security jobs over more demanding careers that might utilize his specialized skills. Being present for her mattered more than recognition or advancement. His radio crackled again with Derek's voice coordinating movements for a VIP departure, but Marcus found his attention drawn back to the security monitors. The suspicious individual had disappeared from view, and that absence worried him more than the previous sightings had. Something was building, and every instinct Marcus had developed through years of training told him that the afternoon's calm was deceptive. The explosion shattered the afternoon calm with devastating force. Marcus felt the tremor through the concrete floor of the parking garage before he heard the thunderous roar that echoed down from the main conference hall. Car alarms began wailing in response to the shockwave, their piercing sounds mixing with the deeper rumble of structural damage above. His radio exploded with panicked voices. "Emergency at main auditorium," Derek's voice cracked with fear and confusion. "We have structural collapse, multiple injuries, need immediate assistance." Marcus was already moving toward the stairwell, his years of training automatically engaging. Behind him, the parking garage descended into chaos as people who had been in their vehicles during the blast tried to understand what had happened. The scene that greeted him on the main floor was devastating. The elegant conference center had been transformed into a disaster zone. A section of the auditorium's ceiling had collapsed, bringing down lighting fixtures, sound equipment, and chunks of concrete. Smoke filled the air, making visibility poor and breathing difficult. People were screaming, running in every direction, their business attire torn and covered in dust. Some stumbled blindly through the haze, others lay motionless beneath debris. The carefully organized seating arrangement had become a twisted maze of overturned chairs and broken tables. Derek stood near the main entrance, his face pale and his hands shaking as he tried to coordinate an evacuation. The other security guards, Mike and James, looked equally overwhelmed by the scale of the emergency. They had trained for minor disturbances and unruly attendees, not for mass casualty events. "Emergency services are en route," Derek shouted into his radio, "but traffic is backing up the response. We're looking at 20 minutes minimum for full emergency response." 20 minutes was a lifetime when people were bleeding out or trapped under debris. Marcus quickly surveyed the scene, his trained eyes automatically performing triage assessments. He could see at least 18 people who appeared seriously injured, some unconscious, others crying out in pain. A woman in a navy business suit sat against a wall, blood flowing from a deep gash on her forehead. A middle-aged man in an expensive watch lay pinned beneath a fallen beam, his breathing shallow and labored. Near the stage, a young tech entrepreneur who had been scheduled to speak next was unconscious, his left arm bent at an unnatural angle. The injured needed immediate medical attention that wouldn't arrive for 20 minutes. Marcus looked at Derek, who was still trying to establish radio contact with emergency coordinators, then at Mike and James, who were attempting to direct the evacuation of uninjured attendees. None of them had the training or experience to handle this level of medical emergency. But Marcus did. For 3 years, he had treated combat injuries under fire, had performed emergency surgery in field hospitals, had saved lives when minutes meant the difference between survival and death. He had retired those skills when he became a father, choosing invisible security work over anything that might put him at risk and leave Lily alone. But 18 people were dying around him, and 20 minutes might be too long for most of them to wait. Marcus moved into the chaos with purpose that transformed his entire presence. The quiet security guard who had spent months blending into the background suddenly commanded the space with an authority that seemed to emerge from nowhere. His shoulders squared, his movements became precise and economical, and his voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to life-and-death decisions. "I need tablecloths, belts, and anything that can serve as bandages," he called out to Derek, who was still fumbling with his radio. "Clear that area by the windows for triage. Move the walking wounded there first." Derek stared at him in confusion. "Chen, what are you doing? We need to wait for paramedics." "People are bleeding out," Marcus replied, already kneeling beside the woman with the head wound. "We don't have 20 minutes. He pressed a clean section of his uniform shirt against her gash, applying direct pressure while checking her pupils for signs of concussion. The bleeding was significant but not arterial. She would survive if he could control the hemorrhaging. Mike and James watched in stunned silence as Marcus moved to the man pinned under the beam. The victim's breathing was shallow, his lips showing the pale blue tinge that Marcus recognized as developing shock from internal injuries. "I need 3 people to lift this beam on my count," Marcus ordered, his voice cutting through the ambient chaos. "We lift together, I pull him clear, then we lower it slowly." The authority in his tone was so absolute that nearby uninjured attendees immediately moved to help. Marcus positioned himself to extract the victim efficiently, his hands already assessing for spinal injuries and internal bleeding. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. The beam lifted, and Marcus slid the injured man clear with movements that spoke of extensive training in casualty extraction. He immediately began checking vitals, his fingers finding pulse points with practiced efficiency. "This man needs immediate attention," he announced, beginning to examine for internal injuries. "His blood pressure is dropping fast." Derek approached hesitantly, watching Marcus work with growing amazement. "Where did you learn to do this?" Marcus didn't answer, focused entirely on his patient. He had torn strips from tablecloths to create pressure bandages and was systematically moving through the most seriously injured. Each assessment took less than 30 seconds, but his evaluations were comprehensive and accurate. The unconscious entrepreneur near the stage had a probable concussion and a compound fracture that needed immediate stabilization. Marcus used chair legs and torn fabric to create a splint, immobilizing the arm with techniques that clearly came from advanced medical training. Other injured people began looking toward Marcus instead of the official security team. Something about his calm competence in the midst of disaster drew them like a beacon. Parents carrying injured children instinctively moved in his direction. Business executives who moments before wouldn't have acknowledged his existence now waited for his instructions. "Have you ever witnessed someone completely transform in a crisis?" Marcus asked one of the conscious victims as he worked to stabilize her injuries. "Where in the world are you watching from tonight?" Sometimes ordinary people reveal extraordinary abilities when lives depend on it. His transformation was complete. The invisible security guard had become the medical authority everyone desperately needed. Marcus knelt beside a young woman whose breathing had become dangerously labored. Her chest rose and fell in an irregular pattern that he immediately recognized as pneumothorax, a collapsed lung that would kill her within minutes if left untreated. The injury required immediate intervention that went far beyond basic first aid. "I need a pen or narrow tube, and something to sterilize it," he called out with calm urgency. "This woman has a tension pneumothorax." Derek approached with a pen from the registration desk, his hands shaking. "What are you going to do with that?" "Decompress her chest cavity," Marcus replied, quickly dismantling the pen and cleaning the tube portion with alcohol from a nearby hand sanitizer station. "She'll die if I don't relieve the pressure." The security guards watched in amazement as Marcus located the precise anatomical landmarks on the woman's chest. His movements were confident and precise, the actions of someone who had performed this procedure under far more challenging conditions than a damaged conference center. He inserted the makeshift chest tube with professional competence, and immediately the woman's breathing improved as trapped air escaped. Her color began returning to normal, and her respiratory distress visibly decreased. "How did you know how to do that?" James whispered, staring at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. Marcus had already moved to the next critical patient, a man showing signs of severe internal bleeding. He began palpating the abdomen, checking for rigidity and swelling that would indicate dangerous hemorrhaging. "This patient needs immediate surgical intervention," he announced to Derek. "His blood pressure is dropping and he's showing signs of internal bleeding. When the paramedics arrive, tell them probable splenic rupture." The terminology flowed from Marcus with the fluency of extensive medical training. He continued working through the casualties, performing complex assessments that revealed injuries others had missed entirely. A businessman with what appeared to be minor cuts actually had symptoms of a basilar skull fracture. Marcus recognized the subtle signs and immediately immobilized his neck to prevent potentially fatal spinal cord damage. An elderly conference attendee was developing cardiac arrhythmias from the stress and trauma. Marcus monitored his pulse carefully, preparing to perform CPR if the irregular heartbeat deteriorated further. Each intervention demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond anything Derek had expected from a parking garage security guard. Marcus moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to treating multiple trauma victims simultaneously, his hands steady and his assessments accurate. The other security guards had essentially stopped their own activities to watch Marcus work. Mike kept shaking his head in disbelief, while James peppered Derek with questions about where Marcus had learned these skills. "Who is this guy?" Mike asked quietly. "5 minutes ago he was just the guard we stuck in the parking garage." Derek had no answer. He was beginning to realize that his assumptions about Marcus had been completely wrong, and that the quiet man he had dismissed and ridiculed possessed expertise that was now saving lives around them. Marcus continued his systematic triage, moving from patient to patient with practiced efficiency. His medical training finally revealed under circumstances where hiding it was no longer possible. The distinctive wail of approaching sirens grew louder as the first paramedic team rushed through the conference center entrance. Marcus had organized the casualties into a systematic triage area, with the most critical patients clearly marked and the walking wounded separated for efficient treatment. The lead paramedic, a veteran EMT named Sarah Rodriguez, surveyed the scene with professional eyes that immediately recognized competent medical organization. Someone had clearly taken charge and implemented proper trauma protocols during the crucial first minutes. "Who's been coordinating treatment?" she called out while her team began unloading equipment. "That would be Chen," Derek replied, pointing toward Marcus who was monitoring the chest tube patient. "Our security guard." Sarah approached Marcus, noting his calm demeanor and the precise way he was checking vital signs. Her experienced gaze took in the improvised medical interventions that had clearly been performed with advanced knowledge. "What's the status on your critical patients?" she asked Marcus directly, recognizing competence when she saw it. "Pneumothorax decompressed with improvised tube, breathing stabilized," Marcus reported with military precision. "Probable splenic rupture, blood pressure dropping, needs immediate surgical consultation. Basilar skull fracture with potential spine involvement, fully immobilized. Cardiac arrhythmias in the elderly male, stable but requires monitoring." The terminology and assessment accuracy immediately told Sarah she was dealing with someone who had extensive medical training. The improvised chest tube showed particular skill, as the procedure was dangerous when performed incorrectly. "What's your medical background?" she asked while examining the chest tube patient. "Combat medic, 82nd Airborne," Marcus replied simply, continuing to monitor his patients. That explained everything. Sarah had worked with military medics before and knew their training was often superior to civilian EMTs in trauma situations. They learned to save lives under impossible conditions with minimal equipment. "Your interventions probably saved 3 lives," she told Marcus as her team began taking over patient care. "The pneumothorax would have been fatal, and your triage organization is textbook perfect." Other paramedics were arriving now, along with firefighters and police officers. The scene was transforming from chaos to organized emergency response, but Marcus's initial treatment had been crucial during those first critical minutes. "What part of this transformation surprises you most?" Marcus asked Derek quietly as they watched the professional medical team's work. "Share your thoughts about how people can reveal hidden abilities when others need them most." Derek struggled to respond. He had spent months treating Marcus as barely competent, assigning him to menial tasks and making jokes about his capabilities. Now he was watching the same man receive praise from veteran paramedics for advanced medical interventions that had saved multiple lives. "I had no idea," Derek admitted, his voice carrying genuine remorse. "I never bothered to ask about your background." Marcus nodded without resentment, focused on ensuring smooth transitions as paramedics took over his patients. Each handoff included detailed information about interventions performed, symptoms observed, and concerns for ongoing treatment. The emergency room would receive patients who had been properly stabilized and accurately diagnosed, significantly improving their chances of full recovery. Fire Chief Robert Martinez arrived as the last critical patient was being loaded into an ambulance. His weathered face carried the gravity of someone who had seen decades of emergencies, and his eyes immediately sought out whoever had coordinated the initial response. The organized triage area and professional medical interventions told him that someone with serious training had been present during those crucial first minutes. Sarah Rodriguez approached him with her preliminary report. "Chief, you need to know about the security guard who handled initial treatment. His interventions were extraordinary. Chest decompression, accurate trauma assessments, perfect triage organization. I've seen emergency room doctors with less skill." Martinez followed her gesture toward Marcus, who was helping the last paramedic team secure their equipment. The fire chief had worked enough mass casualty events to recognize battlefield medicine when he saw it. "Excuse me," Martinez called out as he approached Marcus. "I understand you provided initial medical treatment here." Marcus looked up from coiling an extension cord, his demeanor still calm and professional. "I helped where I could until your teams arrived, Chief." "That was more than helping," Martinez replied, studying Marcus carefully. "Sarah tells me you performed advanced trauma procedures. Who trained you to do field medicine like that?" For a moment, Marcus hesitated. He had spent 2 years carefully avoiding questions about his background, choosing jobs where his past wouldn't surface. But 18 people had needed help, and hiding his skills would have meant watching them die. 82nd Airborne Division, he said finally. Combat medic for 3 tours. Afghanistan and Iraq. The words hung in the air with quiet weight. Martinez nodded slowly, understanding immediately. Combat medics received some of the most intensive trauma training in the world, learning to save lives under fire with whatever materials they could find. 3 tours, Martinez repeated. That explains the quality of your work. How long have you been out? 2 years, Marcus replied. My wife died in a car accident while I was deployed. I came home to raise my daughter. The personal revelation added context that made Marcus's current job choice understandable. Many veterans took quiet civilian positions after experiencing the intensity of military service, especially when family responsibilities became paramount. So you went from saving soldiers in combat zones to working security in parking garages, Martinez observed without judgment. I needed something steady and low-key, Marcus explained. My daughter Lily is 8 years old. She needs a father who comes home every night, not someone chasing adrenaline or taking risks. The fire chief respected that choice completely. He had seen too many good people struggle with the transition from military service to civilian life, and Marcus had clearly found his priorities. Well, today those skills saved lives that would have been lost otherwise, Martinez said firmly. The chest tube alone prevented a certain fatality. You should know that your service continues to matter, even in a parking garage. Marcus accepted the recognition with quiet dignity, the same way he had accepted Derek's earlier dismissal. His sense of worth didn't depend on external validation, but came from knowing he had done what was necessary when people needed help. The revelation of his military background had transformed him from invisible security guard to recognized hero, but Marcus remained fundamentally the same person, focused on responsibility rather than recognition. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at the conference center as the final ambulance departed for Metropolitan General Hospital. As the hospital's chief of emergency medicine, she had been coordinating the incoming trauma cases and wanted to understand exactly what had happened during those critical first 20 minutes before paramedics arrived. The reports from her EMT teams had been extraordinary. Multiple complex trauma cases had received advanced treatment that significantly improved their survival odds. Someone with serious medical training had been present at the scene, and she needed to know who. Sarah Rodriguez met her at the entrance, still carrying equipment from the response. Dr. Vasquez, the initial medical response here was remarkable. We had a security guard who performed battlefield medicine. Chest decompression, accurate trauma assessments, perfect patient prioritization. "Where is this person now?" Dr. Vasquez asked, her professional curiosity thoroughly engaged. She gestured toward Marcus, who was helping conference center staff clear debris from the evacuation routes. His quiet efficiency had shifted from medical care to cleanup without any apparent need for recognition or thanks. Dr. Vasquez approached Marcus directly, extending her hand in introduction. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez from Metropolitan General. I understand you provided initial treatment for our incoming patients." Marcus shook her hand respectfully. "I did what I could until your people arrived, Doctor. How are the patients doing?" "The chest tube patient is stable and will make a full recovery," she replied. "The internal bleeding case is in surgery, but his condition was much better because of your early intervention. Your medical assessments were completely accurate." Behind them, conference CEO Jonathan Blake was surveying the damage to his facility while speaking with insurance representatives. His tech summit had been devastated, but reports were reaching him about the heroic response that had prevented much greater tragedy. Blake approached the group surrounding Marcus, his expression serious but grateful. "Are you the security guard who took charge of medical treatment?" Marcus nodded simply, uncomfortable with the growing attention. "My employees are telling me you saved multiple lives," Blake continued. "The woman with the collapsed lung, the man with internal injuries. They're saying you prevented fatalities that would have been certain otherwise." Dr. Vasquez confirmed the assessment. "Mr. Blake, this man performed advanced trauma medicine under emergency conditions. His interventions were the difference between life and death for several patients." Derek stood nearby, watching the recognition Marcus was receiving from people whose respect actually mattered. The contrast with his own earlier treatment of Marcus was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. The fire chief joined the conversation, adding his professional evaluation. "In 30 years of emergency response, I've rarely seen initial treatment this competent. This man's military medical training saved lives today." Marcus remained humble throughout the praise, deflecting attention back to the patients and the professional responders who had completed the treatment. His focus stayed on outcomes rather than recognition, the perspective of someone accustomed to life and death responsibilities. The growing circle of professionals around Marcus represented a dramatic shift from his morning assignment to parking garage duty. Dr. Vasquez pulled Marcus aside as the emergency scene wound down, her expression thoughtful and determined. The quality of medical care she had witnessed convinced her that Marcus's talents were being completely wasted in his current position. "I want to offer you a position at Metropolitan General," she said directly. "We need a trauma coordinator, someone who can bridge the gap between emergency response and hospital care. Your combination of field experience and advanced medical training is exactly what we've been looking for." Marcus listened respectfully, but his expression remained cautious. The offer represented a return to the medical field he had deliberately left behind when he chose to prioritize his role as Lily's father. "I'm honored by the offer, Doctor, but I need to consider what's best for my daughter. She's 8 years old and has already lost her mother. Stability is more important to me than career advancement." CEO Jonathan Blake had been listening to the conversation and stepped forward with his own proposal. "Mr. Chen, I'd like to offer you a position as our head of corporate security and emergency response. Your actions today showed leadership qualities that can't be taught. We need someone who can develop protocols and train teams for crisis situations." The offer was generous and would certainly provide better financial security for Lily's future. Blake's company was one of the most successful tech firms in the region, and the position would carry significant responsibility and respect. Both opportunities represented dramatic improvements over parking garage security, but Marcus found himself torn between practical benefits and the simple life he had chosen for his daughter's sake. Dr. Vasquez sensed his hesitation. "Marcus, we could arrange flexible scheduling that works around your parenting responsibilities. Part-time consulting, emergency response only when needed. You could make a difference without sacrificing time with your daughter." The compromise proposal was more appealing, but Marcus had learned to be cautious about commitments that might expand beyond their original scope. Military service had taught him how quickly emergency responsibilities could consume a person's entire life. Blake added his own flexibility offer. We could create a hybrid position. Part-time with us, part-time with the hospital. Emergency response training and protocol development. You'd be using your skills to help people while maintaining the work-life balance you need. If you were in Marcus's position, what would you choose? He asked Dr. Vasquez quietly. The question seemed directed at her but carried the weight of his internal struggle. Let us know where you're listening from tonight as we think about the difficult choices people face when opportunity conflicts with family priorities. The recognition and career opportunities were everything Marcus might have wanted before becoming a single father. But Lily's needs remained his primary concern, and he had seen too many military families destroyed by competing demands between service and family. Both Dr. Vasquez and Blake waited patiently for his response, understanding that his decision required careful consideration of factors beyond simple career advancement. That evening, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table while Lily finished her homework. The events of the day felt surreal compared to the quiet domesticity of helping his daughter with math problems and preparing her school lunch for the next morning. But the business cards in his pocket from Dr. Vasquez and Jonathan Blake represented opportunities that could change their lives. "Daddy, you seem different tonight," Lily observed with the perceptive honesty that children possess. "Did something happen at work?" Marcus considered how to explain the day's events to an 80-year-old. "There was an emergency at the conference center today. Some people got hurt, and I was able to help them because of my medical training from the army." "Like when you used to help soldiers?" she asked, her eyes brightening with interest. "Very similar," Marcus confirmed. "And now some important people want me to use those skills in new jobs. Better jobs that would help more people." Lily set down her pencil and gave him her full attention. "What kind of jobs?" "One at the hospital, helping train doctors and nurses for emergencies. Another helping companies prepare for crisis situations. Both would mean helping people the way I helped soldiers." She considered this information with the seriousness she brought to important decisions. "Would you be helping people who really need it?" "Yes, I would be." "Then you should do it, Daddy. You're really good at helping people, and Mommy would want you to use your gifts." Her simple wisdom cut through his complex anxieties about balancing work and family responsibilities. Marcus had been overthinking the decision, focusing on potential problems rather than the opportunity to use his skills meaningfully while still being present for his daughter. The next morning, Derek approached Marcus in the parking garage before the day shift began. His usual swagger was completely absent, replaced by genuine humility that seemed uncomfortable but necessary. "Chen, I owe you an apology," Derek said directly. "A big one. I spent months treating you like you were barely competent, and yesterday you saved lives that would have been lost. I was completely wrong about you." Marcus accepted the apology with the same grace he had shown throughout Derek's earlier dismissive treatment. "We all make assumptions sometimes. What matters is being willing to change them when we learn better. I never bothered to ask about your background," Derek continued. "I saw the uniform and made judgments based on nothing. You have skills that put the rest of us to shame." Marcus shook his head. "It's not about shame. We all have different backgrounds and different strengths. Yesterday just happened to be a situation where my particular training was needed." Derek extended his hand for a genuine handshake. "I'd like to learn from you, if you're willing to teach. Basic emergency response, medical protocols. I never want to be that unprepared again." The offer represented Derek's complete reversal from mockery to respect, acknowledging that Marcus possessed knowledge worth learning rather than dismissing. Marcus accepted both positions, creating a unique hybrid role that allowed him to use his medical expertise while maintaining the flexibility he needed as a single father. 3 days a week, he worked at Metropolitan General Hospital training emergency response teams and developing trauma protocols. 2 days a week, he consulted with Blake's tech company on crisis preparedness and emergency response systems. The arrangement provided financial security for Lily's future while utilizing skills that had been dormant for too long. More importantly, it allowed him to make a meaningful difference in people's lives without sacrificing his primary role as a devoted father. His first training session at the hospital drew doctors, nurses, and EMTs eager to learn battlefield medicine techniques. Marcus demonstrated the improvised chest tube procedure that had saved the conference center victim, teaching others how to save lives when standard equipment wasn't available. At Blake's company, he developed comprehensive emergency protocols and trained security teams in basic medical response. His quiet authority and proven competence commanded immediate respect from people who might otherwise have dismissed a former parking garage guard. Derek became his first student, approaching the training with genuine humility and determination to improve. The man who had once mocked Marcus for handling simple security tasks now hung on every word as Marcus explained emergency triage principles and basic life support techniques. 6 months later, Marcus stood in Lily's classroom watching her give her presentation about heroes. She had updated her poster to include photos of him training medical teams and receiving recognition from the hospital and tech company. "My daddy was a soldier who saved people, and now he teaches other people how to save lives too," she told her classmates with obvious pride. "He says everyone can be a hero if they help others when they really need it." The presentation earned enthusiastic applause from her classmates and teacher. Marcus felt a deep sense of peace watching his daughter beam with pride about his work. He had found a way to honor his military service while being the present, stable father she needed. That evening, as they walked home from school, Lily asked about his day at the hospital. "Did you teach anyone important things today, Daddy?" "I taught a group of nurses how to help people who are having trouble breathing," Marcus replied. "And tomorrow I'm teaching security guards how to help people who are hurt before the ambulance arrives." "So you're helping people help people," she observed with 80-year-old logic. "That's exactly right, sweetheart." As they reached their front door, Marcus reflected on the unexpected path that had led him from invisible security guard to recognized medical trainer. The explosion that had seemed like tragedy had actually revealed his true calling, allowing him to use his gifts in service of others while building the life he wanted with his daughter. If this story touched your heart, Marcus thought as he helped Lily with her homework, subscribe for more inspiring stories and let us know where you're watching from around the world. Sometimes the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary abilities, waiting for the right moment to shine.